but it really depends on what you're practicing. Again, not to sound like an ass, although I'm sure I do to some people right now, saying that some of the greats, some of the greatest musicians, some of the greatest guitar players that have ever lived didn't use a metronome or don't always use a metronome. So what? That doesn't change the fact that most of you should absolutely be using a metronome for a lot of practice stuff to give yourself the best bet to become the best player you can be. First time doing this for a video, I decided to respond to a YouTube comment, and this comment was left on a video that's quite a few years old where I talk about how to use a metronome to get faster on guitar. And if you watch that one, you may hear me contradict myself, because back then I actually recommended starting off at 80 beats per minute for certain things. I don't do that anymore. It's always 60. So I thought going through this person's comments and discussing it, I thought it would be a good teachable moment for a lot of people. Instead of looking at the comment where it was left, I wanted to break things down in a little easier to read format here, but I didn't correct grammatical errors that were originally left. And I also didn't feel it was necessary to post the person's username. So let's go through section by section of what's said here. So let's get some ideas discussed. He says here, if you can play 8 notes on every beat at 60 beats per minute, you are entering shredding zone. I very much disagree with that. Why? Well, let's look at what that actually is. Using this notes per second calculator, if you're playing 8 notes a beat, that is 30-second notes. And personally, I don't think anyone should be really working up 30-second notes anyway. If you have read my Metronome Method ebook, which you can get for free if you haven't, I recommend 7 notes being the maximum amount of notes you do per beat. I just don't see any real benefit to doing 8 notes per click if you're trying to build up speed. You can certainly work on 30-second notes so you get used to playing 30-second notes and hearing 30-second notes. But I'm going to say it's a rare exception anyone does that. Most of the stuff you play is not going to involve 30-second notes. In fact, it's going to be a lot easier just to count things as 16th notes anyway. For example, if you are going to play something at 120 beats per minute and you're trying to do 30-second notes, you might be better off just trying to do 40 beats per minute with 16th notes. But we'll get it more into the whole metronome going fast in just a moment. Anyway, so you see here on this calculator, 30-second notes at 60 beats per minute is 8 notes per second. Well, 16th notes at 120 is 8 notes per second. 120 beats per minute, 16th notes, in my opinion, my very biased opinion, that is not shred territory. That's not it. I say when you reach 160 beats per minute with 16th notes, then you're pushing shred territory, but not 120. That's not fast enough, in my opinion, to be considered shred, but that's just my take on it. Next part of the comment says, if the metronome is too busy, it's hard to hear the beats. As long as the notes are in a unit and you start the 9th note on the 2nd beat, the 17th note on the 3rd, and so on, you are doing it correct. Yes, if the metronome is too busy, it's hard to hear the beats. All the more reason why I tell my students and encourage everyone who watches my stuff, get your ear used to hearing the metronome going quickly. Because if you can't accurately divide a beat up into, say, 2 parts at 200 beats per minute, if you cannot accurately divide 200 beats per minute into 8th notes, how in the hell do you expect to divide up a beat into 8 equal parts and go fast with that? I strongly believe, strongly feel, if you train your ear to hear metronomes clicking faster than 200 beats per minute, all the way up to 300 beats per minute, and you can accurately divide that thing into 2 parts, you're going to have a much better chance of accurately playing 16th notes. That's one reason why I always tell people, work it up slow, make sure you are accurately hearing every single thing. And when people tell me, and I've had students tell me this, like, oh, they're having a hard time hearing the metronome click past 200 beats per minute. I say, well, good. Keep working on that. It's not good that they can't hear it. It's good that they recognize that, which is more of a reason to keep practicing and training your ear to hear the metronome click at 200 plus beats per minute. Of course, it's easier to hear the metronome clicking at 60, but if you're trying to cram in more and more and more notes at slower tempos, you're going to have issues anyway trying to accurately divide all that stuff up. And I'll tell you this, it's way easier to divide a beat up into 4 parts versus 8. You could make the argument, well, you need to train your ear to hear 8 notes per click versus 4. Fair enough. But that doesn't change the fact that if you want to play fast music, it's a very, very good idea. In fact, it's probably an essential, necessary thing to do. Train your ear to hear that metronome clicking fast, 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 fast. No one will know unless it's recorded and slowed down if a series of notes is out by a microsecond. That's true. No argument there. Some of the greats don't use a metronome all the time, as they have developed flawless technique. Well, I'll tell you this. To me, this is a non-argument, because most people watching this, most people who play, are not one of the greats. And to use someone who's 1 in a billion as an example of how you should practice, I think is a horrible idea, and it's completely pointless. So if this 1 out of a billion person managed to get great technique and speed and all this stuff without a metronome, that is no reason for you or anybody to not use a metronome to get better. I accredit my speed and accuracy to doing a ton of metronome work. Hours and hours and hours, years and years and years. And if you watch some of my live streams where I practice, you see I still do the metronome work that I promote in that free ebook, Metronome Method. Do you have to use a metronome the entire time you practice? Of course not. But it really depends on what you're practicing. Again, not to sound like an ass, although I'm sure I do to some people right now, saying that some of the greats, some of the greatest musicians, some of the greatest guitar players that have ever lived didn't use a metronome or don't always use a metronome. So what? That doesn't change the fact that most of you should absolutely be using a metronome for a lot of practice stuff to give yourself the best bet to become the best player you can be. Over time, it's within some musicians' grasp, not everyone's, because they don't have the ability physically. I think that one should be reworded. So yes, over time, some musicians can get crazy fast and some won't. That is true. In fact, I've talked about that in other videos. There is absolutely a genetic component involved with how fast one can get. Some people are born to play fast. I am one of those people. Getting fast was easier for me than most people I have met, and that includes people that I've taught. Doesn't mean I didn't work my ass off to get as fast as I could. Unfortunately, some people can work just as hard, but because they just don't have the physical ability to get insanely fast, they won't. And I have seen that with quite a few students I have worked with and currently work with. I don't like saying stuff like that because I don't want people to feel discouraged, but it is true. Some people will just never get very fast, and they're not going to enter that shred level speed of the 160 with 16th notes. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I feel 160 at least is like shred territory, and not even that fast shred territory. Getting up to the 180, 200 beats per minute with 16th notes, that's definitely more traditional shred speed right there. So, summing all this up, I felt that doing a response this way would be better than just replying via text on the comments that we looked at here, because only one person would probably see it, plus maybe a handful of people that actually stumble across that old video. This way, we can get some more discussion going, and hopefully some of this information is helpful for people. What do you think about what was discussed here? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Why do you disagree? Have you reached insanely fast speeds with accuracy without ever having touched a metronome, or very little? All right, that's it. This video is